Pelletier, Commissioner of the Canadian Coast Guard. Carolyn Xavier, Chief of Communications Security Establishment. Natasha Kim, Associate Deputy Minister of the Department of National Defense. Heather Shishi, the Assistant Deputy Minister of Material of the Department of National Defense. Jonathan Moore, Chief Financial Officer of the Department of National Defense. I will now invite the Minister to his opening remarks. You have up to 5 minutes. Welcome again.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all members for inviting me to appear here today. I think you've just had my colleagues introduced to you, so I won't bother reintroducing them. But they're all here, of course, to continue on after I'm not able to stay. And I may very well turn to them, if I could, colleagues, during the line of questioning for their insight and their experience as the operational experts in the Department and the Canadian Armed Forces. Since my appointment, Mr. Chair and colleagues, in May, I've had the privilege of working with an exceptional team, dedicated public servants, military leaders, and civilian experts who are helping to strengthen Canada's defence and security. I've also travelled across Canada and to Europe to meet with the brave women and men of the Canadian Armed Forces repeatedly. I've concluded their contributions to Canada are simply second to none. Au sein de toute notre équipe, j'ai constaté.
Across our entire team, I have seen renewed motivation and a sense of urgency in the face of evolving threats. Together, we are taking bold steps to rebuild, re-equip, and reinvest in our military. We're focusing on ensuring that the CAF is well equipped, well supported, and ready to accomplish any mission. This can only be happened if we make generational investments in our capabilities, our operations, and our personnel.
Canada is investing nearly $63 billion in defence this fiscal year alone. This includes over $9 billion in new funding, which the Prime Minister announced in June. So let me start with where it really counts, where it all begins, and that is with our people. One of the greatest privileges of this job is meeting members of the Canadian Armed Forces, hearing their stories, their pride in serving Canada, and the challenges that come with that service. To better support them, we announced major improvements to the CAF compensation and benefits package just this August. Members across all ranks will see their pay increase by 8 to 20%, depending on rank, through adjustments to the military factor, which recognizes the unique demands of military life. Many will also see additional increases based on years of service, on occupation, or deployment status. Colleagues, this is a long overdue and well-deserved pay increase for our forces. Investir dans nos forces signifie également
investing in our forces also means attracting more talent to strengthen our ranks. That's why we are modernizing our recruitment processes, notably by introducing a trial period, removing outdated medical standards, and implementing new digital tools to help candidates join more quickly. This means that we can recruit more people faster and retain them. I am pleased to announce to this committee that this year recruitment has reached its highest level in 10 years.
Not only to recruit people, but also to retain them. As part of our efforts to rebuild our forces, we continue to advance culture change, ensuring a safe, inclusive, trustworthy, and respectful workplace for our members. And through Bill C-11, we are modernizing the military justice system, reinforcing principles of fairness and accountability for our people in uniform. I'm pleased to note that this bill completed second reading in the House 2 weeks ago and will shortly be coming to this committee for further study. And I thank each and every one of you for your support. I look forward to returning to committee to speak about this important legislation, and I eagerly await the outcomes of your important study of the bill. As we invest in the next generation of CAF members, we're also making crucial investments in our military capabilities, specifically the equipment and the infrastructure that enable CAF operations. That includes building our fleet of River-class destroyers, procuring future fighter aircraft, and modernizing ground and communication systems. from top to bottom. Let me be clear. Across all of our projects, we're focused on value for money and ensuring this work creates jobs and supports the Canadian economy. To drive these efforts further, we're developing a brand new defence industrial strategy to strengthen Canada's defence industrial space, a national first. And we recently launched the new Defence Investment Agency to cut red tape and accelerate delivery of equipment to our troops. Finally, we remain focused, Mr. Chair, on operations, both at home and abroad. Throughout the year, we have thousands of CAF members deployed across the country, in Europe, and the Indo-Pacific, and beyond. Their vital work reinforces our commitments to NATO, to NORAD, and our global partners. Likewise, our colleagues in the Communications Security Establishment and the Canadian Coast Guard make critical contributions to our defence and security. Mr. Chair, before concluding today, I want to acknowledge that earlier today the Auditor General released 2 reports covering CAF housing and CAF recruitment. These are good reports. They're important reports. We thank her for those reports. We welcome the recommendations. Not only are they an integral part of ensuring fairness, transparency, and openness in how we conduct government operations, they also give us the crucial information and the guidance about what we're doing well and where we need to improve. After all, the women and men of the Canadian Armed Forces deserve that. It's a busy time for defence. I look forward to discussing our priorities with you in more detail. And I look forward mostly, Mr. Chair, through you to all the members, in openness and utmost sincerity, to your constructive and thoughtful suggestions for improvement. We are in this together. The women and the men of the Canadian Armed Forces are counting on us. Merci. Je suis prêt à répondre à vos questions.
Thank you. I'm now prepared to take your questions.
Minister, for your opening remarks. I will pass it on to our Vice Chair, who has 6 minutes. James Bazin, over to you.
Mr. Chair, before you start the clock, I just want to give notice of motion that the committee invite the Auditor General to appear for no less than 2 hours to discuss her reports tabled on October 21st, 2025, including recruiting for Canada's military, housing Canadian Armed Forces members, and cybersecurity of government networks and systems, and that the committee invite the Minister of National Defense and relevant officials to appear in a separate 2-hour meeting to address the government responses to the above Auditor General reports, and that both meetings take place before December 12th, 2025. I'll start my round of questions. Thank you, Minister, for appearing. I appreciate that. Time is precious, so I'll go quick. Earlier this fall in September, Vice Admiral Angus Topshee said the Royal Canadian Navy should consider having 2 separate fleets of submarines. Then that was followed that very same day. Reporters asked Prime Minister Carney in New York, and he responded that nothing that I see would suggest that we would have a mixed fleet in submarines. You just get too many efficiencies and economies of having 1 fleet. Do you agree with that statement?
I do agree with the Prime Minister's statement. After we down-selected from 5 to 2, thereby accelerating the process by a full 2 years, James, it put us in a better position to be able to negotiate with 2 potential suppliers to maximize our benefits, to get the submarines that we need, and there is definitely a question of economies of scale here.
Thank you for that. Minister, you said earlier this summer that you told reporters that you would make a decision on the F-35s by the end of summer. That's already a month past. You also said that you would consider the decisions taken by your department officials, Chief of Defence Staff, the Royal Canadian Air Force Commander, and the Deputy Minister have all come out saying the F-35 is the plane that they need. So just wondering, when are you going to make a decision on this review, and how much more is it costing us every time we start playing politics with this procurement?
Well, you won't be surprised that I disagree with your categorization that this is about politics. This is about ensuring we take the time, colleagues, to get this right. This is a very big purchase for Canada. There are many elements involved in that purchase, many parts, but we are reviewing it. It is well underway. It's continuing. The review is continuing. We've been participating in this program since its inception in 1996. It was, as you know, conceived, developed, and continues to be operated jointly, 8 founding countries. So right now that review continues, colleagues, and obviously we're going to take the time we need.
mentioned the defense industrial strategy. What happens if you go with a different aircraft than the F-35? There's already thousands of jobs that are tied to the F-35 in Canada and the production, over 2,000 from what I can gather, in places like Winnipeg and Montreal and Richmond, BC. Are we at risk of losing those jobs if you select a different aircraft?
That's an important question, and it's one that obviously the folks who are conducting the review would be compelled to look at, I would think. It is not me who's conducting that review, it's our officials.
As we've heard from the ambassador, that he says that this is an irritant and this dragging on of the F-35 contract. This plane won in a competition that your government ran. I know that you guys have decided to pause that, but we are committed to the first 16. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And if we don't buy the rest of the aircraft, have you talked to the consortium and the joint project office on whether or not the jobs that are tied to the production and the future maintenance of not just the Canadian F-35s, but the entire fleet of F-35s that are part of our allied and coalition partners that could potentially be coming through the sustainment side, the maintenance side, the engine overhaul that could be happening at depots in places like Montreal and Winnipeg?
All of these important questions, Mr. Bazan, are part, I'm sure, of the review that's ongoing. You're right in indicating that there are 37 Canadian companies that have contracts now supplying goods and services for the F-35. There are millions of dollars accruing to Canadian industrial benefits per plane that are purchased, manufactured, and sold. So we'll obviously take the time we need to get this right. It's a very major acquisition, and there are many questions here that we're trying to address at the same time.
On the defense industrial side as well, and you talk about also support for Ukraine. We know that the Liberal government had promised to buy 25 refurbished LAVs that were going to be refurbished by Armatech just outside of London, Ontario. Now we're hearing that contract has been paused or canceled. Nobody at Armatech can talk because they're under a gag order from the Liberal government. Ukraine is saying they want those armored vehicles, and they're not being delivered. Why, in that one decision to cancel that contract, you're both turning your back on Ukraine and turning your back on the defense industry here in Canada?
There is a decision that's been taken to nullify the contract with that company presently, so obviously I can't go any further in terms of discussing the merits of it. We'll see how that evolves in terms of the relationship between the department and the contractor. It's important for Canadians to remember there are several types of vehicles that are being shipped to Ukraine, and we've already shipped 89 armored combat support vehicles to Ukraine, 49 of which were delivered between the fall of 2022 and the fall of 2024. The remaining vehicles are currently being delivered, with the final vehicle scheduled to arrive before the end of this year. So quite a bit of supply, quite a bit of material has been supplied, and of course the most recent.
No, Minister, a lot of that equipment has been destroyed in the war. That the drone warfare that is taking place there has diminished the capabilities of a lot of the land vehicles that we had sent over. So why wouldn't we want to supply these ones that contract was already awarded, the announcement was already made? Why not carry through and give Ukraine what they want and support Canadian jobs here at home?
Give you more insight into the reasoning behind the department's decision to cancel the contract, but I'm not in a position to do so. But I would say this: we have, of course, we were one of the first 3 or 4 in the world to purchase a $500 million package for Ukrainian material through the Pearl program in the United States, for material chosen by the Ukrainian military authorities. That's already being delivered, and a lot of that, of course, constitutes drones and drone technologies and anti-drone equipment. So we're there. I just came back from the NATO meeting. There's a very strong resolve by Canada and NATO as well as a whole to continue to support the brave women and men in Ukraine who are fighting a very difficult war.
Thank you, Mr. Bazan. Over to you, Mr. Watchorn. You have up to 6 minutes.
Monsieur le Président. Merci à tous les témoins d'être ici aujourd'hui.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the witnesses for being here. It's very informative for us, for our work. Thank you, Minister. I'll start by saying this. I think you know we've had an enormous positive experience at the Petawawa Air Base in a couple of weeks ago, and we met with the forces there, there are major investments that are being made. We're trying to increase wages. We're trying to do something about housing. We're looking at buying equipment. Minister, I know you've seen more or less all of the bases in Canada, met with people there. I'd like to know what the members have said when you've met with them. When I met with them, they were quite pleased. I'm curious about how they feel about our investments. First thing to share is the level of surprise. When I meet with members of our Canadian Armed Forces, men and women alike, not only the issue of investments in wages and benefits, but also continued investments in water systems, building of housing, daycare centers, infrastructure on the 33 bases, the purchase of fighter jets, submarines, tanks, and the list is long. People are shocked. They are actually surprised by the speed at which this is happening. For instance, 2 weeks ago, we bought a building that had 37 apartments within it in Esquimalt. It's the first time the department, to my knowledge, has participated in the purchase of a private building. And the time it took between the decision and the bid and the purchase was 5 weeks. That's unheard of within the department. That's the speed at which we're doing things because we realize the urgency of rebuilding, rearming, and reinvesting for our armed forces. The response that I'm getting on the ground is positive. They're somewhat surprised, but they're very pleased. They're grateful. They're happy. Thank you very much for this answer. I think the forces have been neglected, and the time has come to really invest, and it's happening. You know, Minister, that Canada has a clear plan to get to 2% of NATO's spending during the course of this fiscal year. We're investing in armed forces by increasing wages, supporting Ukraine with what it needs to win, and we're investing in essential military capabilities for Canada. This historic investment's purpose is to guarantee that we are investing in our fair share to the alliance. Canada and the allies have agreed on a new investment scope until 2020. Over the next few years, we will reach 3%. What is our plan to meet this NATO target? Do we have a couple of hours to answer your question? There's an entire list. For instance, we decided to extend our involvement in Latvia with over 3,000 members. This is a major investment. This is for an extra 3 years. Recruitment has increased by 50% in the last fiscal year. That's the highest increase in the last 10 years in the Canadian Armed Forces. What mattered at first was the number one goal was to invest in our people, and the decision was made to make these changes to wages and benefits. Recruitment is increasing. Equipment is continuing to be purchased. The water filtration systems have to be fixed, and the list is long. We have broken this down in tranches, and the most important implementation is set with timelines where we are addressing the issues in a disciplined way. Do I still have time, Mr. Chair? Yes? In Petawawa, we were speaking to an ALAV operator, and he took us around in an ALAV, and we were having discussions with this young man. What the issues were for him, and he told us that he was quite happy about the wage increases and our commitment to housing. His issue, he was certified as a gunner. And his story is that he was certified as a gunner 2 years ago. And then for 2 years, there was a lack of ammunition to actually train with for him to be operational. Let's say he were to be deployed to Latvia. Will the investments we're making mean that our soldiers will have the ammunition they need to train and to be more operational when they get sent abroad? In short, yes. When the Defense Industrial Strategy will be published in the next few months, I hope, I think you'll see major decisions taken by Canada where we really want to focus on rebuilding. No, maybe not the term rebuilding is not the right term, but expansion of the defense industrial sector as a whole, the investments. We saw with INT Precision that they can now produce 5,000 artillery shells per month. That's an increase of 2,000 per month since compared to the figures from December 2023. Under our defense policy, the department already plans to invest $9.5 billion over 20 years to build a strategic supply of ammunition. And so we have a plan. Now it's about implementing it. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Savard-Tremblay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Welcome, Minister. Welcome to the defense team in general. Thank you for being here today. Minister, you were here on the day that the Auditor General tabled her report. I would imagine that you were expecting a few questions on that. I'm a kind guy. I'll just quote from the report and let you react. In the report, one of the two reports have the title of which the first one is Recruiting for Housing Canadian Armed Forces. So it says the CAF is not managing things correctly to meet the needs of the CAF members, that the CAF does not have reliable information about furnished housing. The defense said that it needed up to 7,000 extra units and that its own projected housing projects still involved a deficit of housing. The CAF did not even knew where the new cadets would go. The new recruits would be sent in terms of which bases. I know that you're relatively recent to your position in the last few months. Efforts will be made to increase recruitment, as we know. The average age of these quarters, the buildings are about 60 years old. There have been issues with wastewater, clean water, and building and updating, etc. What are going to be the priorities for 2025, 2026? That's an excellent question. I'm pleased to see that the Auditor General studied the matter and gave us recommendations. For a while now, we've been working to improve the situation. The analyses were done on the system as it stands. There's more information today than there used to be, based on the auditor's report. But this year, I was in Edmonton. We're building 36 new units. We're talking millions of dollars. It's almost complete. In Borden, I visited a new home where there are 300 new units being built, 824 new units that are being worked on, that have been purchased in Esquimalt, Borden, Gagetown, Halifax, Kingston, Petawawa, Trenton, and Valcartier. So there are some in Quebec as well? Yeah, absolutely. So there is a lot of work to do. We're currently reviewing some new ways of doing things, like, for instance, purchasing an apartment building. This is new. Major contractor can do renovations throughout the entire country rather than have local contractors here and there. Everything's on the table. The money is there in terms of investments. Now we're talking about implementation, and that's exactly what we're doing. Are the resources enough? Are they sufficient? You say the money's there, but what I've learned is the problem is really often on the ground. It's difficult sometimes to find the right contractors, the engineering specialists, those who set up HVAC, as they say, those who work on design, people who work with cement. I mean, there are delays. It's often the case. And so we have to work strategically with these providers. Can you tell us about the other report having to do with recruiting for Canada's military, also tabled this morning? It says that the forces have not recruited or trained enough people to meet the needs. There's 6,000 regular forces members missing, 8,000 some reserve forces, and 71,500 reserves, and 30,000 reservists would be the ideal. 1 out of 13 people were recruited, and most people would give up halfway through the process. So millions are being spent by Ottawa for planes and ships, but we don't have the staff to operate them. What does this mean? And do you think the budgets that have been called for are required to get that workforce we need to meet these needs? Before I ask General Carignan to help me out with this question, I would say that there's a major factor, that is the wages and benefits announcement. That has a major impact on the number of recruits. 65% more people are interested in being recruited than last year, interested in enlisting. Thank you. Yes, the observations and recommendations of the OAG are taken on board. It's absolutely critical for us to improve our recruitment system. Of note, in the course of this report being drafted, we were actually working on changing our procedures, and we had new investments that were underway. We digitized procedures to some degree. So we've made many changes over the last year, which means that for the year that ended in April, we've gone beyond our target by over 200 people for the first time in the last 10 years. So the changes are definitely bearing fruit in terms of personnel. Now this year, where do things stand? We've seen good results with respect to retention. We have an extra 200 people, and we are expanding. All of this is certainly due to these new investments, compensation schemes, and the rest. Currently, we're halfway through the year. By the end of September, we stand at 58% of our targets, and our target is higher than last year. Last year, we were targeting 6,500. Now we are aiming for 7,000 regular armed forces members, and we are set to meet that target, even though the target is more ambitious when it comes to recruitment. We are currently making improvements to everything else in terms of training. There were some initial changes that we made last year, but this year we want to make sure that we have the capacity to train all the new members that join the Canadian Armed Forces.
Folks, we do have a member of our legislature with her hands up, but I did want to provide some unanimous consent to allow someone who's not part of the membership to ask a question. Do we have unanimous consent? No. I'm sorry, Ms. Lidhout, we don't have consent for interaction. We appreciate you being on Zoom to witness the proceedings. At this point, Ms. Gallant, you have up to 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and through you. In response to a critical shortage of pilots and to prevent them from being poached from commercial airlines, pilots were offered increases based on years of experience, but now we have lower ranks making more money than their superiors. How are you going to ameliorate this discrepancy?
That's an excellent question. and a difficult one. I think we all recognize that the Canadian Armed Forces have been having some difficulty for some time recruiting and training and keeping pilots. This is not unknown to the Canadian Armed Forces, or to armed forces around the world, with commercial contracts being so attractive. I have confidence in the decisions that were made by the Royal Canadian Air Force operational experts who brought in a series of new packages to
But you're going to think about it. Okay.
Yeah.
In parallel with the delayed pay increase slated for next month, a majority of recipients who receive the Canadian Forces housing differential are expected to see a decrease in their entitlement. Given that we have a huge cost of living crisis, why was it the decision made to give our troops a cut in the housing differential given the pay raises?
and ask the operational expert if you don't mind.
Actually,
do you mind?
could you, we're going to have the CDS later, so we can ask for that later.
I kindly ask you to defer the details to the general, if you could, afterwards.
All right. Recruiters, for example, 450 Squadron used to do in-person outreach, but everything's gone online now, and applicants cannot even confirm whether or not their submissions were received. Why is it that there is no follow-up for the thousands of people who go online, provide their applications, but they don't hear from you or anyone for months, 6 months at a time, even longer?
Yeah, again, an excellent question. By moving to an app-based system, we've obviously driven up significantly the number of applications from paper copy. Of how we now respond to those folks who press send, for example, with incomplete applications, is something we're examining. Do we want to go back and use that baseline of applicants to reapproach them or return to them to say, did you make a mistake? Did you forget to send all the information? Would you like to continue with the application? We're examining this internally to make sure that we don't let good quality folks slip through the cracks. So that's a very perceptive question that we're trying to address internally as we beef up the whole recruitment process. And as you know, we brought in the app-based process. We brought in many changes to the medical requirements for that application process. And it seems to be having a positive effect, as the General indicated a second ago.
So your government promised the F-35 review to be completed by the end of this summer. Why have you not released it yet?
Because it's not complete, because the F-35 review is still underway, because we're going to take the time we need to get this right. And it is a very, very complicated issue for Canada. And that's exactly where we're at. So we're going to take the time that we need to get it done, and that's what we're doing.
And when do you expect it to be released to the public?
It's difficult for me to answer that question. It's underway. It's obviously primarily conducted by the department and by the CAF, but it has, of course, a bearing on the Prime Minister and the Privy Council office, and those things are combining to take the time that this whole process needs.
So a previous witness, Mr. Richard Shamuka of the Macdonald-Laurier Institute, testified that the F-35 procurement is being used as a bargaining chip in your government's trade negotiations with the United States. How can you justify putting that expense against our national security?
I wouldn't necessarily agree with that characterization. I am in constant touch with the Pentagon. I was down to see Secretary Hegseth 2 weeks ago and saw him again last week at the NATO meeting. The level to which we are working in cooperation with the United States on security, intelligence, and defense is unshaken in my view. So I think that this is a bit of a mischaracterization.
So we're short of pilots to begin with, we talked about earlier. What's the interoperability of having two different fighter jets in the Royal Canadian Air Force, and how would they perform together effectively, given that most of our allies are going to be flying F-35s?
There'll be a total of 21 countries in the world flying F-35s, and so far none other. There are many jurisdictions in the world who have dual fleets, including Australia, including the United States. But the question of dual fleet is not one that I'm seized with at this stage. I'm waiting for the results of the review that's being conducted, and we'll have more to say about that. But the question of interoperability is a very important one. particularly as it deals with IAMD and NORAD responsibilities.
Within our own military, an F-35 pilot doesn't necessarily know how to fly a Gripen. So that has not been solved yet. How much is your government estimating to lose if you axe the rest of the F-35 order?
I'm sorry, how much we expect to what, sorry?
So how much is the government expecting to lose if you axe the rest of the F-35 order?
Cancellation fee.
I see. So I can't answer that question presently. My understanding is that the terms of that agreement are fixed, but also negotiable. So I don't know if that is something that is even being taken into account right now in the assessment that's going on. I think that the technical assessment that's going on with the F-35s is primarily a technical assessment.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Ms. Gallant. I will now move over to Ms. Lapointe. You have 5 minutes.
And thank you, witnesses, for
Sousa,
being here today.
Lean into the
Minister,
mic
my
more.
first question relates to NATO defense spending targets. And NATO allies often look to Canada as a trusted and steady partner. And how does this year's increased defense spending enhance our interoperability and our leadership within NATO operations, particularly in areas such as cyber defense, logistics, and Arctic surveillance?
It's had a profound effect. The commitment and the realization in the world that we're actually stepping up and joining the ranks of our colleagues in NATO, and that we co-negotiated the 5% target for 2035 has had a profound effect on Canada's credibility and ability to deliver. So I think that's a very, very positive thing for us as we re-engage domestically, continentally, and internationally. And those three are somewhat different. Certainly at the NORAD level, with the NORAD modernization plans that were announced some years ago, $38 billion if I recall, this is going to have a profound effect on our ability to defend our airspace here continentally. So these things coincide. I remind my NATO colleagues regularly that Canada has that special continental responsibility. Many of them don't. And nowhere is that more important than in the context of the Arctic, where Canada is being asked primarily by the United States and other NATO countries to take on a greater share of the responsibility when it comes to security and sovereignty in the Arctic. So
Yeah,
a lot of the
we don't do
investments that are
anything up there.
forthcoming will be addressing that question. Forward operating location expansion, NOSHs as they're called, the possibility of deep sea ports, the question of electrification of the north, the question of dual and multi-use, expanding landing strips, all of this is under consideration. All of this is being planned. So this has been a very, very major, significant announcement to the world that Canada is serious about rearming, reinvesting.
Minister, you talked about NORAD modernization. So can you elaborate on how these new funds, because the budget makes significant investments in NORAD modernization, how are these new funds being directed, and how do they reinforce Canada's role in terms of continental defense?
First, these are big numbers and a little bit astonishing for Canadians, I'm sure, but this is the cost of doing business today in the world when it comes to advanced technology and investments. We're investing $38.6 billion over 20 years to modernize Canada's NORAD capabilities. For example, we're working with Australia now on an Arctic over-the-horizon radar system. This is a profoundly important system. We will know in Canada, and our American colleagues will know, our American neighbors will know what may be coming at us on from over the Arctic, whether it's the Canadian Arctic or over Alaska. So we've got 2 sites in southern Ontario that are expected to be operational by 2029. National Defence is also working on many issues with Indigenous, territorial, provincial partners. The question of IAMD, Integrated Air and Missile Defense, is one that I'm pursuing with the Pentagon, working with the Secretary of Defense now. The Prime Minister announced some months ago that after 20 years of a bit of a chill on discussions with the United States on this question, it was important for us to have those conversations, and we are having those conversations to see where this comes to ground, how we come to ground. We've also, as I mentioned, got these forward operating locations in Inuvik, in Yellowknife, in Iqaluit, and a deployed operating base in Goose Bay. So all of these efforts are going to support NORAD operations, give us new capabilities, and improve our readiness in the north. This is what people are expecting of us as we assert our security and our sovereignty over the Arctic.
The Canada and U.S. defense relationship is one of the closest in the world. How do the new defense investments, particularly those tied to
Bottom rows of those cinder blocks remain absolutely untouched. There's been no frost heaving, no leaking, no heaving or shifting. That relationship is fundamentally strong and continues. Remember, we have the only binational command in the world. NORAD is the only binational command in the world. It's a great privilege to be able to work with our American neighbors. And so Canada is going to continue to manage that relationship very carefully. There are some very big modernization investments going on in surveillance systems, threat identification, response speeds, ability to deter and defeat aerospace threats, ensuring that CAF can deploy and sustain a strong military presence across the country, including in the north, future-proofing NORAD's ability to defend North America through investments in science and technology, the over-the-horizon radar system I mentioned earlier, the first tranche of which is about $6.5 billion. And the list is long. So all of this will allow for Canada to dig down and to build a defense industrial base which is ready for takeoff and for growth. We've got 600 companies now in this space. Personally, I'd love to see that doubled. That's my personal ambition, if we can get there, or at least taking our companies that are significant players and doubling their books of business, which is also why we went to the European Union and signed on to the SAFE agreement, which is a $1.25 trillion marketplace for defense over the next decade. There's a lot of opportunity for Canadian businesses here, a lot of job creation. I think we all know that, and we're very excited by it.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Mr. Savard-Tremblay. You have up to 2.5 minutes.
Oui, merci. On va parler de langue.
Thank you. I think the language is also an important issue for retaining members. There are many jobs that really require English. They may supposedly be bilingual. Most specialized jobs, cyber, specialized, even trades like infantry and others really are English focused. Whenever there is training offered, it is impossible, nearly impossible to get training strictly in French. There's no support for Indigenous languages either. For Rangers who are forced to speak English rather than their own language, like Inuktitut. This is something we're noticing. Can we expect some strong measures on this? I think that would have an effect on retention. If all courses were made available in French and in Indigenous languages, that would help. Is that part of the plan? Is there a timeline for that? These are excellent questions, Mr. Savard-Tremblay. This is not something I've looked at more closely, but one interesting thing to note is that I was recently speaking with a representative for Francophone countries in NATO, and he was actually asking me the same thing. He said, what are you doing in Canada? It's not easy for us because so much information, so much equipment is manufactured in Germany, the U.S., even Canada. Often these manuals are in English. It's the international language, sure, but it's an important question. I'd like to bring that back and get back to you on that. Yes, it's actually absolutely possible for you to provide the committee with any further information that you may gather. Mr. Chair, how much time do I have left? In 30 seconds. Okay, well, to get back to the issue of the gaps in the area of recruitment and retention, General, you were referring to goals that were being met increasingly, but that 100,000 that had been set, do you think you'll reach that? 100,000 new recruits. So the first phase is to get back to our full complement of 71,500 actually total military staff. April 2029 is the goal for that. which is far earlier than 2032, which was the initial goal. Additional investments mean faster progress towards those goals. Anything that can support recruitment activities, funds to attract people, marketing, headhunters for specialized or areas that are in distress. We have many tools at our disposal to seek out the people that we need. So that's the first phase. Then, now that was for the regular forces. 14,000 positions are being considered for new capabilities we are currently creating. All of this will come together over the coming years, and then we'll be able to have the capacity we need as well as the membership we need to integrate that within the Canadian Armed Forces.
Now we're now going to Mr. Kimball. I think you may be splitting with Mr. Anderson, and you have combined up to 5 minutes.
My question is through you to the Minister. Bill C-12 Oceans Act implies the Coast Guard will report under Department of Fishery and Oceans. And in fact, I asked yesterday in the House of Commons the Parliamentary Secretary to Public Safety this question, and he has stated Coast Guard will fall under the DFO. He then stated the Coast Guard will fall under 2 departments. So, Minister, could you please clarify, will the Coast Guard continue to fall under Department of National Defense as indicated in the recently signed OIC?
Yeah, the Coast Guard, the Canadian Coast Guard will fall under the Department of National Defense. Amendments are being made in C-12, which is the new C-2, to amend the Oceans Act to give the Coast Guard the authority it needs to move from, it gives it the authority to be able to provide information which would be used for security purposes.
Was for public safety was confused then on his answer?
I don't know what the part. I'm not sure what they said.
I told you what it said, but fair enough. It just seemed like a bit of
I'll take a look at that.
Yep, thank you very much. I appreciate that. And C-12 tasked the Coast Guard with security patrol, surveillance, intelligence gathering. Presently, they're not equipped to do that. So what are the cost estimates, time estimates to equip, train the Coast Guard to support their added tasks?
I can't give you an exact timeline right now. I think the Commissioner might be better placed afterwards because you might want to hear from.
Then
I will turn to the expert. Sir?
Well, we'll ask those questions later.
Okay.
If that's all right. The Prime Minister stated that Canada will not split submarine contract. Will you commit the same for F-35 program for the same reasons for not splitting the submarine contract, for not splitting F-35 aircraft program?
I think once the review is completed, we'll be in a much better position to address that question of mixed or non-mixed fleets. But thank you for asking.
Okay. We'll look forward for that information, Mr. Anderson.
Thank you. Sir, we've heard testimony here that the world is a much more dangerous place and has become more dangerous over the past 10 years. We are lacking recruitment, we're lacking soldiers, equipment, and housing for those soldiers once we get them. Can you tell me why these are, so we're essentially starting from ground zero. Can you tell us why the plan is so back-end loaded?
I'm not sure, I don't think we are starting from ground zero, but we're certainly catching up very quickly. And we're making decisions that are expediting things. And with the new procurement agency that's being stood up by mid-November, you're going to see a speed of acquisition, the likes of which this country's never seen, because we've never had this kind of structure.
With respect, I'm asking why we're putting most of the money at the back end of this procurement when we're in a fairly dangerous position right now and under-equipped and undeployable, frankly, in the north.
What do you mean by the back end? Help me understand.
Well, I mean, long after your government is no longer in power, the rest of this money is being spent. Very little is being spent at the front end when we're in a bit of a crisis situation right now.
$63 billion is being spent this fiscal year, including an additional $9.3 billion that was announced in June. That's going to have a profound effect. That was, for example, $2 billion or more that are going into the pay and other package increases for folks. That's having a great bearing on keeping people and bringing them into the system. I think that's one of the reasons why recruitment's up. There's a lot of very immediate investments that are going on right now. There are contracts being let. There are acquisitions underway. So I don't know. It's all back-ended.
On that subject, then, do we have a formal procurement strategy? Do we have something written down, a plan to procure the things that we need? Do we have a strategic plan, first of all?
We have a defense industrial agency which is being stood up, the details of which will be made public very shortly. That's going to have a great bearing on any acquisition over $100 million. Here's something else that we've done. We've actually given more local authority. We've given more purchasing power to folks who are on our bases, for example, our commanders or L1s.
At a time, I just have one more question here. Do we have a comprehensive CSAR? Do we have a CSAR plan, communications strategy to go forward on? Do we have a plan to move forward?
You forgive me, it's not a term I'm
it's an acronym. It's a military acronym. It's a Command, Communications, Computer Intelligence, Surveillance, and Reconnaissance. It's essentially a plan that says, what are we going to buy? When are we going to buy it? Do we have one?
C4ISR.
It's
what we call C4ISR. This is, in fact, command and control suites and digital systems that allow us to combine a massive amount of data and then be able to read from sensors and analyze what we are actually seeing to make decisions.
Have something in place for that?
Yes, we have plans and programs that are evolving over the next few years to rapidly get to a good place as we are onboarding new capabilities like River Class and so on and so forth. So absolutely.
The reason I'm asking is because we're actually making movements forward. We've moved the Coast Guard under the D&D umbrella, but it doesn't sound like we've got a strategy in place. Is that a fair statement?
No, I don't think so. It's not a fair statement. We're in the middle of planning the retrofitting of existing vessels. We're procuring new vessels, lots of them. They will be equipped and fit up with the equipment that we need to be able to pursue our IAMD objectives, which is basically making sure that what happens in the air, what happens on the water, what happens below the water, what happens on land, and what happens ultimately in space will be connected. That's exactly what an IAMD system is. That's what we're contemplating for North America. Those are the kinds of conversations we're having with the United States, and we've been having for 20 years with the United States, up to a certain extent. We've lifted the freeze, and now we're more fulsomely pursuing that.
Thank you, Minister. I'm sorry, Mr. Anderson. We're over time. Monsieur Chris Mallet, over to you. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Minister, thank you very much. I'd like to thank you firstly both for both your visits to my riding in the Bay of Quinte this summer to visit CFB Trenton and 8 Wing there, as well to General Carignan for her visit as well in August for the announcement there as well. So your announcement specifically, Minister, of the $850 million investment into CFB Trenton was very well received and appreciated by those stationed there and their families. And I've had the opportunity to hear firsthand some of that over the summer, and it's been very, very well received. This important project, the $850 million into the infrastructure, is strengthening our operational capabilities and supporting economic growth in my riding. Could you tell us a little more about the effort in modernization of our air mobility, and in specific to air mobility as it's affecting my region, CFB Trenton and 8 Wing, and the impact of infrastructure, those infrastructure upgrades at 8 Wing?
Let me take a second if I could, just to, at a maybe 10,000-foot level, just to remind Canadians how important national defence and CAF is to the Canadian economy. Everything we do, every dollar we invest is about also economic benefits for Canadians, Canadian companies and workers. And we're going to need to pull up the slack. There will be sunrise and sunset industries in Canada, as there always are. Canada's defence and security industry generates about $14 billion in revenue now. That's 81,200 direct jobs and over 200,000 indirect jobs. $9 billion in GDP to Canada's economy. For example, when I met with Irving Shipyards, 2,400 local employees and 10,000 knock-on jobs across the country in terms of the supply chain. So when we were in Trenton announcing the $850 million, it was very clear to us that not only was this important for the acquisition of the new refuelers, the Huskies, to refuel our fighter jets in the sky, and to use those aircraft to do many other things. It was also very clear to us that this would create 1,000 full-time jobs in the Trenton area for some time. These are bricklayers and cement workers and HVAC and electrics and design and steel and aluminum and acquisition and logistics. So if you multiply that, Mr. Millett, across the country in terms of the investments we're making on bases, it's astonishing. I had this conversation with Premier Smith in Alberta, who was shocked to learn at the extent to which the Canadian Armed Forces is investing in Alberta. Billions of dollars of economic activity in Alberta, which is going to have a profound effect on jobs. The apartment building that's being built at CFB Edmonton, I met the folks who design it. It's designed in a way that we can take the design, shrink wrap it, and replicate it all over the country because we own the IP, we own the architectural design, we own the engineering design. But the jobs that created in the Edmonton, city of Edmonton and the region were just incredible. So if you multiply this over and over again at 33 bases and in up to 3,000 communities where the Canadian Armed Forces are located in Canada, you see the potential impact as being dramatic.
And further to that, my earlier mention that this summer on that visit and when the Prime Minister made the announcement, giving our forces a well-deserved pay raise, something that had been neglected, as you pointed out as well, Minister, for several governments and several years. $2 billion in pay and benefits. I know it's already impacting the Bay of Quinte region and other regions where CAF members live, work, and the civilian spin-offs as well. Untrained soldiers, sailors, privates, aviators will receive 20% pay raise. Can you just give us a little bit of a high-level view of how this pay raise and compensation package will help in the retention? We've spoken a little bit about retention today. Is this showing an impact? I believe the numbers are up, but do we have any way to quantify how that may be affecting the recruitment and retention?
We will, more specifically over time, as these pay increases kick in, retroactive to April 1st. So members will be getting a lump sum payment very, very shortly. So it's going to be important for us to monitor the effects of that. We'll take a first year private from 42 or 43 to $53,000 a year, plus other benefits. So it's a question of watching now to see. But look, it's important for us to try and to remember collectively. We ask the women and men of the Canadian Armed Forces to do some pretty difficult things. We ask them to relocate frequently. We ask the young woman mechanic from Bagotville to get on a plane and fly off to Cold Lake for a month away from her family and kids to repair helicopters, right? We ask all kinds. There is no collective bargaining. There is no overtime. Right? We ask these people to give us a lot, and our view is we need to meet them in the middle in terms of what they give with what we supply and support them with. And we're of the view that if we invest the right way in pay and remuneration and incentives and annual bonuses and recruitment and retention and housing and childcare and healthcare and dental, all the things that this department and the Canadian Armed Forces is called to do, the more that we do, the better that we do that, the higher performing our Canadian Armed Forces will be. This is well established around the world. If we have people worried, looking over their shoulder, not able to do their jobs because something isn't right in the balance of their lives, it will not help us achieve our secure and sovereign objectives.
Minister, committee members, that concludes your time, sir. Thank you very much for your comprehensive discussion and deliberations. We very much enjoyed your presentations. I'm going to suspend for a moment, folks, so that we can then restructure ourselves.
Okay. So, yeah, we were just covering the first hour of this. Honestly, he said a lot, but he said nothing at the exact same time. I think I just listened to an hour of absolutely nothing. And I'm sorry you all did too. I was expecting a better line of questioning from the Conservatives after the new report from the AG today. I was expecting questioning on the lack of estimates that was on a previous report by the AG. Like, for example, they estimated how much it was going to cost for F-35s, but they didn't include any cost for missiles or ammo or maintenance or new hangars. Like, I don't know. So tomorrow we're live at 2 p.m. for question period. Obviously, it's Wednesday. The House doesn't even open until 2 p.m. anyway. I believe there's ethics after. I just haven't double checked to see what's going on in it, but we'll probably cover either that or finance. There'll be some committee in the afternoon at 4:30 for sure. But we are done for today. If you didn't see the committee from yesterday, I put a couple clips out on the channel from the CBC one. That was a really good committee. So check those clips. They're up at the top of the channel. And we will be live tomorrow, 2 p.m., guys. So thanks all for sticking around. Thanks all for watching. And have a good rest of your evening. I will see you guys tomorrow. Cheers, guys.